I will now call the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee meeting to order. Welcome to the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee meeting. This meeting's being held in person and electronically in accordance with the Municipal Act. Today we have no public meetings or open delegations. Our first thing is there is one presentation taking place this evening. The presentation is concerning the 2024 City Services Operating Budget and Capital Plan. I will now call upon Craig Miller, Chief Financial Officer, to provide the presentation.
Good afternoon, Chairman Harvey, and members of committee and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to present the 2024 City Services Operating Budget and Capital Plan. Just as I get into this, while I get to be the fortunate one that gets to present the budget to you, I will say it is no small feat. There's an army of staff members sitting around this table and back here, and also that aren't here today that have participated in this exercise. So it truly is a team effort. And as I figure out which clicker to use, we're just going to go with a hand signal to the IT guy. All right, perfect. So just to refresh where we are, where have we been, where are we going, and where are we? When you look at this slide, it looks like, holy smokes, we haven't gotten too far. But we have actually done a ton of work. So back in May, we kicked off the budget. There was a budget direction memo, I believe, to council in June. The province then introduced some new legislation on July 1st that we weren't prepared for or aware of at the beginning of this process. So we've incorporated that. It's where we are today. Of course, under the Strong Mayors Act, the mayor shall present a budget to council by February 1st. So we are achieving all the deadlines required of that budget. We are here today, and if under the category of what's new this year, so Strong Mayor's budget's new, but also first coming to Finance and Responsible Government's a new process for us. So we are here today, and then next week we'll go into General Committee for deliberations, and then council approval of the city's operating budget and capital plan December 6th. And then service partners are coming to present their budget on January 17th. So those are the three largest service partners. That would be the county, the police, and the library. And then council will be deliberating on January 24th with approval by January 31st. So before we get into the meat of the budget, I would just want to talk a little bit about our financial policies and our frameworks that are in place. There was a question came up, I think last week at General Committee. The city does have a financial policy framework. It's sort of a guideline document that previous councils had approved. It's not a 100% rule-based, it's just a guideline. So it provides us with bumpers in terms of how much money we should keep in reserves, how much debt we should use. And it's really based on a point in time. So when staff come forward with budgets and reports, it gives us guidelines. Those are where our recommendations come from in terms of what reserves are we using to fund what projects. We're also driven heavily by legislation. So the government tells us also what reserves we can use for which projects. So combine the two together, and it's an important document. Our credit rating agency, Standard & Poor's, does review our policies every year. And proud to say that once again this year, Standard & Poor's approved the AA+ credit rating for the city of Barrie, which is a big accomplishment if you step back and look at how much growth has happened here and how much growth is going to continue to happen. But having that credit rating does save taxpayers money because it does keep our interest costs down lower than they would normally be. And one day, I think not too distant, if things keep going the way they're going, one day I look forward to be able to stand here and say it's a AAA rating. So we're not too far off that, but this is the challenge. This is why you are elected to guide us through and make some difficult decisions. So we have some great policies. Standard & Poor's has called that out. They've complimented our financial stewardship that council has done. But of course, there's always a cautionary tale. So that's the bottom part of the slide. So reserves of the city, we are growing, we are rehabbing, we're doing all we need to do, but you can never have enough money, but is the bottom line. So our reserves are under pressure, and that's something that we need to manage and work through each year. And that's what the budget process is all about. So we go to the next slide. So just before we get into this number, I would like to thank council. We provided the budget information last Wednesday, late Tuesday morning or early Tuesday morning. We received a lot of questions from some councillors, which was fantastic. I couldn't believe you were up so late. We have some night owls here. And then we got some more questions yesterday. So staff are still working through some of those details, and we will provide some answers tomorrow and probably the next day as more come in. And then keep them coming, because we still have a general committee next week. So as we get into the question period tonight, we will do our best to answer your questions. If it gets too detailed, we may need to get back to you on some of them, but we'll work through that process. So from a city services standpoint, where are we? And I think this year's the city's really seeing the impact of inflation, of what it's been last year. If you remember, not a few months ago, I think it was 8%. I believe it's getting down to 4% now. But we're seeing that in the delivery of the services. And just like everyone at home is paying more for pretty much anything you buy today, your dollar does not go as far as it did a year ago or 2 years ago. And the city's also experiencing those same challenges. So 9.2 million. So that's a net number. So there are fee revenues that offset some of the costs. But at the end of the day, the main drivers really relate around contracted services. So we have a waste management contract that's seeing some pressure. We have a transit contract that's tied to inflation. That's giving us some pressures. And then, of course, we also have salary costs in there. So the QP contract was at 2%. Included in this number would be last year's approval of the hiring of 20 firefighters in 2024, which is about 1.8 million. So we call all that maintain service levels for city operations. So that's kind of what we've approved previously, and maintaining the status quo. That's where we're at. And on the tax, what's the impact to the taxpayer? So the table on the right, or the column on the right, tax rate impact, that is reflecting the average assessed home in Barrie. So I have to underline assessed home. It's not market value. It's based on the assessment that MPAC did back in 2016. And the assessed average value is around 368,000. Obviously, market values are much higher than that today. And when the province decides to move forward with a reassessment, then that's when that adjustment will be made. So working through it some more, the next line is increased operational subsidy reserve draws. So what that means is we're pulling an additional 550,000 into our operating budget. So for example, we have about $4.9 million that we pull in from our reinvestment reserve to fund city operations. So overall, we're drawing more than we did last year. So that has the effect of decreasing the impact on the tax levy on the taxpayer. Debt management. So we have some debt servicing costs that are maturing, as well as our forecasted levels. We're reducing the budgeted line item for tax funded debt by 1.1 million. So that's positive in that it's reducing the impact on the levy. Reserve contributions, so excluding IIF. So just to refresh everyone's memory, we are never again using the word DERF when we do a budget presentation. It's now called IIF. So if anyone says DERF, they're going to have to make a contribution of some sort to a charity over the next 3 weeks, myself included. So IIF, formerly the DERF. And what that, this line excludes that amount. So what these other reserve contributions include, we have reserve, for example, fleet management. A number of years ago, there was a fleet financing strategy brought forward and implemented because of the cost that we had a lot of old vehicles and it was expensive. So part of that plan is to increase the contribution to that reserve, and it's about 450,000 is included in there. We also have about 250,000 related to the WSIB reserve. We are self-funded here at the city, so that reserve is under a lot of pressure. So it's to make sure we have enough money to pay those commitments as they come in. So those are increases to the levy, so it's 0.28%. New investment and service recommendations. So in your binder, there are intake forms that describe what make up these requests. I will say the ones that involve staff, the executive management team actually has a much greater list that comes forward to them from the city, asking for a lot more than what we're showing in the binder this year. EMT does go through them, and based on our best knowledge we have, we make recommendations. So this would be a prioritized list that EMT has brought forward to you. And that, of course, is enhancing services, and it's a $925,000 increase, or 0.29 on the tax rate. And then assessment growths of $6 million. So I guess the best way to describe this would be a return on investment. So all the millions of dollars that the city has spent over the last number of years, this would be the new homes that come online that increase the amount of revenues that we collect. So for next year, 2024, it's looking at around $6 million. The offside too is, remember, we do have to provide services to those homes, so that tax dollars is helping us that way. So that's a benefit to the city at this point. So it's reducing our overall costs. So if you add it all up, city operations about 3.3, almost $3.4 million, or 1.06% on the property tax levy, or sorry, for the average property tax owner. And just at a high level, translating it into what is, what's the size of the city's operations budget. And it's $325 million. So really what we're showing in this pie chart is how does it get funded? So the big number that funds this is property taxes. Property services really were designed to provide, property taxes were really designed to pay for property services. As you all know, over time, property taxes are funding more than just property services under the current financial model that has been given to municipalities. So that's 191 million, almost 192 million for city operations. That's the largest number. If we look at what's number 2 on that list, is contribution from reserves of $44.5 million. I'm just skimming through that to make sure that is number 2. Yes. So example of what that would be is we pay in our operating budget, for example, debt servicing costs related to, let's say, the water plant that was built many years ago, and the wastewater expansion. Those are paid from development charges. So those would be included in that line item. There's also, we use reserves to also fund some of our operating folks are paid for through capital recoveries, and that would be included in that line as well. So it's an important funding source, but it's remember that it is sort of part of our revenue stream overall. So we are relying on our own reserves really to pay some of these things. And then just point out fees, service charges, rentals, 36.4 million, or 11%. So those again would be the user fees that we collect. That would include everything from transit, recreation, any user fees we charge. So there's a concept of, where possible, user pay. Those who use it should pay for it. So when we do start changing fees, whether we lower them or give breaks for them or don't charge them, and we don't reduce the costs of those services, then we have to fund them from some other revenue source. So something to keep in mind. So that's the tax rate budget summary. If we remember, we also have user rate budget. So that would be our water budget, wastewater and parking. So water rates and wastewater fees, the water rate that we charge, are required to provide those services. Municipalities are required to have a long-range financial plan to provide a sustainable water system. It doesn't require it for wastewater, but generally municipalities do include that and study the two together. So the rates increases for 2024 are 3.97% for water, 4.94% for wastewater. Those are in line with the city's financial plan that was done a couple of years ago, which I would say is outdated because inflation has been much higher than was anticipated under that study. They are seeing, like everyone else, substantial costs in water and wastewater, particularly around chemicals. They've gone up substantially. But the rate, we've kept the rate to as was recommended. I think as we go along, we'll need to continue monitoring where we are on our capital costs for water and wastewater and the balances in those reserves, as well as where they are in their operating impact. And then, of course, parking, there's no change proposed in the fee for 2024. All right, so just like that, we're done operating. Now we're going to move into the capital plan. Go to the next slide. Another question was asked about the framework on capital that staff use. And again, this was the general framework that we do when we prioritize from a staff perspective. We do look at council strategic plans. There's been direction to focus on the growth management plans, and then investing and renewing the city's existing infrastructure. And this is the really important one, using a risk-based approach to project selection. So I was a bit remiss, I didn't call out Kelly Oakley's team in the asset management group, but they do a lot of great work guiding us and ranking projects. So this would be the renewal type projects. What's going to fail tomorrow that we have to fix today? They have many recommendations that they bring forward. Unfortunately, there's not enough money to fund them all. There are competing priorities, but the highest risk ones certainly do come forward first. And it's important work that they do. And of course, there's the finance piece that comes into the equation. As I said, there's many more needs than we have needs and wants than we have financial resources. And then it's also the availability of resources, staff resources, or how do you deliver these projects is also weighed into it. So what's in the plan? So I've got 3 boxes there that look somewhat confusing, but I'm going to try and explain them. So in total, the plan as is right now is a total of 691 million, but I'll explain what makes up that total. There is at this point a projected 169 million carry forward into 2024. So what that means is projects that are ongoing, because capital is a multi-year commitment that has many different aspects to them. So at the end of this year, previously amounts that have been approved in the past, we expect we'll be carrying forward 169 million of that into 2024. So that's ongoing work. In addition to that, if I go to the right side of the 3 boxes, the 269 million of previously approved, what that represents is that in last year's budget, you would have seen some approvals for 24, 25, and 26. So it wasn't going to be spent last year, but we needed approval so they could award some tenders. So those were previously approved, the 269 million. And then this year, as part of the 2024 plan, you're being asked to approve another 253 million. So when you add them all up, 691 million, and that's over the next 4 years, 4 to 5 years is the anticipated spend. That is a big number for the city of Barrie. We have a plan where the finance part of that, the reserves, how we fund them. There's some good information in the binder this year on where we are on reserves. And we also use that for some of this. But I think that's something we need to monitor closely. If right now we've had a few good years in development charge revenues coming in, inflation's high, economy's apparently heading to a recession. If we do start to see declines in some of those revenues, we'll need to revisit this plan, whether it be next year or sooner. The challenge is when you're committing a lot up front, once you get to a construction phase of a project, it's really pretty difficult once you've awarded the contract to back it up. So I think it's something we need to be aware of is we just don't have the money to do it all. So it's the more you commit now, the less impact, less levers you have going forward. So something to keep in mind as we work through the budget over the next few weeks. And again, my favorite topic is the financing of it. The engineer they all like the expense side, not like what they're spending it on. The fun part for us is trying to finance it. So this slide has 521 million. I'll just point out it doesn't include the carry forward from last year. So this is really addressing the previously approved and the new requests. So, you know, if you look, it's the city of Barrie, we're a growing municipality. I think you guys know the budget pretty well. Not surprising, the number one funding source is development charges, almost $167 million. Second number up there is tax capital reserve, $132 million. So this would be over the next 4 to 5 years is the spend. So while I know development charges are a necessary evil that are being identified as impediments to building homes, the reality is this is the framework municipalities have been given. If we don't have those revenues and they're not replaced with something else, the homes don't get built. So this is a number, again, we had 2 great years. We're monitoring this one closely. Standard & Poor's, when they assess their credibility, they look ahead 3 years and they're very happy with the liquidity levels we have. That's why we have the rating, and we're pretty happy with them as well. But we'll be monitoring development charge collections over the next year to see where we're at as we go into the following year's capital plan. And again, we rely on tax capital reserves significantly as well. If we go to the next slide. So tax capital reserve, what this table is really showing you, it's in the binder, is it's really money in, money out, right? Over the next from 24 to 2028. If you look at the bottom, it's really saying that over the next 5 years on average, the 5-year average is we're putting in 49, close to 50 million, but we're taking out 64, right? We're taking out more than we're putting in. So long-term, the sustainability of that is a challenge. The way it's showing right now is by 2026, we'll be slightly overcommitted. The good news is 2024, we're actually have about 32 million of uncommitted dollars, which is a good sign. But really the reality is a lot of those commitments are going to happen in the outer years. So by 2028, it's going to be down to a small 2.3 million. If everything happens, if all the work's completed as planned. So again, that's a low amount for a city the size of Barrie to have uncommitted. Our financial policy framework does have a recommendation to try and keep, approximately $25 million free and clear for a rainy day. That's an aspirational goal, but you can see that we're on a trend where we're using up every penny that we sort of have. And if you go to the next slide. Just want to remind the reinvestment reserve. So just a reminder, what is that? It's funded by Barrie Hydro Holdings, which was the owner of shares in Electra. So it's basically the Electra dividend. So the Electra dividend flows from Barrie Hydro Holdings. 20% of that dividend goes to the tax capital reserve per our financial policy framework. And then 80% goes into the reinvestment reserve. So what this table is showing, the ins and the outs for 2024 will show us we've slightly overcommitted by 815,000. We can't continue we're not going to go to 4 million in 2025 or 8 million in 2026. So council will have to make some challenging decisions over the next year to right that ship. Where's the funds going? Again, just remember, this is like an in and out type of entry. So there's $2.5 million that's going to a theater reserve. Council approved a few years ago. So on average, we're looking at about $5.25 million going into the reserve. So half of it's going to the theater reserve. There is 1.2 million going to the community improvement plan reserve. So that's used to help fund affordable housing applications and heritage requests, things of that nature. And as you can probably guess, there's not enough money for all that. So something to keep in mind as we go forward. And then finally, the big number is 4.9 million. So we're drawing 4.9 million out of this reserve, basically from that dividend right into our operating budget. So that's funding, helping offset some of the tax pressures, right? That's a number that once you're at that level, it'd be hard to unwind that. If you didn't use this reserve, you wouldn't want to be taxing straight up for council. You'd have to find some other way to fund it. So between now, as I say, when we get into the 2025 budget, I think council will make some tough decisions and this projection will change. Next slide. And then finally, debt forecast of where we are today and where we headed currently. So by the end of this year, 2023, outstanding debt will be 299 million. You follow it along, you can see it decreasing to 280 million. So you know, think of the debt kind of as a mortgage. We pay each year. We've got some that's gone off the books. And then we do have some plans where we will need to issue some debt in the outer years. We didn't do any debt issues in 2023 because of the way the rates are, and our liquidity levels are pretty good. We'll revisit 2024 if we do any debt issues towards the end of the year. We'll see where things are. On the table on the right, you can see what is the cost of the debts, annual debt servicing costs. So it's 40 million in 2023, rising to 47 million by 2028. Those are again based on current projections. So we'll see where the interest rates do go. For a growing municipality like Barrie, this is not unusual. You have to build the infrastructure to get it in place. The city, if you step back and think back, the water plant, which was debt financed, and the expansion of the wastewater plant, that work that was done 2010 or 2011, whatever it was, that's really been a catalyst to allow the city to grow and to benefit from that. And the debt servicing costs related to those plants are funded from development charges. So those were, you know, prudent investments, and without the debt, it wouldn't have happened. Right? So this isn't unusual for a city in our growth pattern. You can see the blue light highlights mainly development charge funded is what the debt is. Strategically, if we had more money in our tax capital reserve, we could probably unwind more of the expected debt needed to fund tax supported assets. That would be a great goal. But as you saw in the previous slide, our tax capital reserve is heavily, we're using every penny we have on it. So there will be a period in time where we're going to need to use some debt to support tax supported assets. And just a quick reminder, I won't repeat everything at the beginning of the slide on the timelines. I will just emphasize that glad to see that we have got a lot of questions that have been emailed to budget.questions@barrie.ca from council. As I say, we will be providing answers tomorrow and Friday, but please, I encourage you to use that email as we continue through this journey. It is monitored by finance staff. And with that, I will put it back to the chair.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Miller, for your presentation. And given the time that we're at and our full agenda, I would ask that members of committee and other members of council hold their questions and ask those questions through the week, so that way we can get through our agenda that's slated for us here tonight. So our first item is a referred item. There's two referred items on tonight's agenda that were referred from the General Committee on November 1st, 2023 and November 15th, 2023. The items are motion 23G 269 referred by General Committee on November the 15th, 2023 in regards to an investigation, design and reconstruction of the main parking lot in Painswick Park. Can I have a member of committee place the correspondence on the floor to be received?
I can place it on the floor.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Congo. Are there any questions from any members of committee? Any members of non-committee? Oh, go ahead, Mayor Nettle.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly with regards to this Painswick Park, I believe. Yeah. So I think with it being probably considered as part of the next conversation we're going to have, it's appropriate to let it be at this point. And so I would just ask the clerk, how do we do that? Is that by taking no action, or is that, do we have to vote on it? Like what's the process there?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Mayor Nuttall. Given that there is a potential amendment coming forward that's related to the budget, I don't foresee, I think you could just deal with the amendment as part of this referral motion, because doing nothing with it, it just would end up being kind of messy, I guess, so to speak. So if Councillor Hamilton wanted to carry forward to General Committee, because she cannot move amendments this evening or have another member move it forward. They could amend what's on the floor and put something on the floor, or they can, this would carry through to general next week. And then we could put an amendment forward at that time.
So concurrently, we have the referral from GC that we're talking about right now, but then we also have the budget. And so if something's put into the budget, but then not dealt with in this part of the motion, the result is you have two conflicting items, I think is what you're saying.
Through you, Chair Harvey. Yes.
So what would the verbiage look like to allow it to be dealt with both at the same time?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Mayor Nettle. We could just
Could we defer it for one meeting until after the budget and then deal
that
with
would
then?
probably be the easiest.
Okay, so I'll
thing
move to
do.
defer the item to the next finance committee meeting.
Great. So we have a deferral motion, and I do not believe, I know a referral is not debatable. I don't know if anybody, can we debate a referral?
Chair Harvey, yes, you can debate a deferral motion.
Does any members of the committee have any discussion around the or deferral motion? Any non-members? Okay, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that passes.
So just to confirm, you're gonna be dealing with this in about 5 minutes. This is just the preferred item, but doesn't stop you from dealing with it in the budget. Okay, so because, yes. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
It's all great. The joys of technicalities. The second item is 5.2, also a referred motion, 23G 256. General Committee on November the 1st, 2023. Circulation memorandum concerning This Week in Barrie legislative ads in Barrie today. And can I have a member of committee place the correspondence on the floor to be received?
Up on the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Kungle. And are there any questions from members of committee? Any questions from non-members? Oh, go ahead, Councillor Kungle.
Thank you. And seeing that we have Nagusa here, I think my main question was knowing this, I think came out of a seniors and accessibility meeting and then came to council. And I read through the reference to the Access Barrie memo that identified that staff, did understand and have been engaging with Barrie today around the impact of getting communications out to members of our community that might be impacted by not having a local paper, and that staff are reevaluating options for this week in particular, which is the piece that we put out in 2024. And so I saw nice actions in this, but I wanted to clarify, because this didn't come with any changes from that conversation, what was it that you were looking for Finance Committee?
Councillor Nagusi.
Actually, as I am not a member of the committee, I ask you if you can refer the motion to this committee. I would like to read what I would like to see happen, and maybe a member of the committee could put forward on behalf. So as I read the memo on today's circulation list, A3 from the city clerk, seeing as it is about noticing procedure for public notice, which is closely related to this issue, I think it might be the prudent to hold on this matter until we can properly refer the memo next week at GC to a future finance committee. I would like to introduce a motion to refer the item on the TWIB memo to the first finance committee meeting in the new year so that we can have a fulsome discussion on both related issue and provide direct to staff on next steps.
Follow up, if I may, Chair Harvey.
Sure, as long as it's not a question in regards to the referral motion.
He can't move a
Actually,
motion.
that's right too.
He's
You
just
can't
making a
remove
statement,
The
I think.
referral, that would have to be a member of committee if you're willing to do that afterwards.
Well, I think while I still have the floor, I've got some points of clarification, if I may. I'm still not clear in asking for a referral motion to come forward to a future, what the ask is of the Finance Committee. So are you asking for the city to be putting money forward to then pay for additional ways in which, and I believe that that's what's being investigated in 2024. So I'm still not clear on what ask is even coming back to a referral motion. Could you provide any additional information about like what the scope of the conversation is you want to have? Are you looking for money tied to this?
Basically, what I was asking is a printable option to reach out to the senior citizens.
If I may, through you, Chair Harvey, if I may redirect the question to Ms. James Reed from a communication standpoint, with reference through the memo by Ms. Harris about staff really reevaluating options, is that in scope of looking at costs and or options for print, non-print around seeing that this has come through a sensitivity of not just seniors, I would imagine, but anyone that really doesn't rely on technology around getting out important information? And by that memo, you know, it's been rightfully scoped that important information we used to put out in the paper was also about building developments and being able to notify people what was happening around significant changes. Could you speak to what's in scope?
Thank you. Through your chair, Harvey, to Councillor Kungal. When we first did the memo back, I guess, October 25th, we wanted to quickly action because of the closing of the Barrie Advance. So we quickly wanted to continue our communications, and that's why we went with an online version with the intent that in 2024, we would go to RFP. As council knows, because of the staff report, I think it's number 63 in the finance report, gives some options for cost savings. One of the cost savings in Access Barrie was to pull back some money because we had put that forward prior to the Barrie Advance closing. And our intent was to go to one page if the Barrie Advance was still in operation. So you'll see a cost savings there. What we were anticipating in terms of an RFP in 2024 was we would go to market and see what we can get, but we have very limited money left. So if there is a desire to do a printed publication, and if there is not a bidder that would come forward to do like a printed regular mail out or a newspaper of some sort, it would be an online option. So I don't know that it totally addresses the concerns of the Seniors Advisory Committee because we only have, I think, $44,000 left in our budget, and that would not nearly be able to meet that need of the printed copies.
And if I may, if I'm on the right page and follow up, Ms. James Reed, that was the $44,000 that's in the table in Appendix E that's tied to hard copy printable forms. That's part of that scope of reducing the tax base. I guess at this time, I don't necessarily want to just defer it out without that aligning to some of the information coming forward and then seeing where we get to in the budget. Because if we're supporting reducing budgets that are already eliminating anything that we would carry forward from a taxable print, it may be changing the scope of the conversation about what else, how else do we look at this through a lens around access to information. So from a timing, I don't want to just generically toss it to the new year when there's other steps. So I'm not sure if other members of committee have comments on that, but right now I'm pausing on it, but would be happy to bring it back when we know more about where we land in the budget, if there's a financial appetite, are we cutting in the budget anything tied to communications resources? And if that was the flavor of the conversation, then finding out, well, what does this mean then for gaps in communication as a result of not having a hard copy paper?
Mayor Nettle.
Yeah, I think very much like the other motion we were just dealing with, I think that there's dual conversations happening tonight, as you point out, with regards to the budget. Councillor Kungal, for me, I don't want to see the reduction of the $44,000. I do share Councillor Negusie's concerns with regards to seniors in our community. And I don't know how widespread that's ever going to get. Like, you know, is there going to be 40,000 newspapers delivered door to door ever again? Probably not, right? But are there, you know, special and specific opportunities that could come along? Probably. And I don't know, there are in other communities, like you think about Springwater News, right? They, you know, I don't believe they're going door to door of every farm in Springwater, but they are in the public spaces, etc. So I don't know what that looks like. I think it's difficult to have the conversation, as you're pointing out, when it's on the chopping block inside of the budget. So like the other one, I'd recommend we deal with the budget, you know, set the direction, and then come back to what's left or not left inside of the budget. if that makes sense to everyone else.
Then if I may, Chair Harvey, look to Ms. Cook around maybe best recommendation. So do we just then defer it to pass the budget when we know what the impact is and resurface this at the next finance and our committee? But I guess that would be in February.
Ms. Cook.
You, Counselor Harvey, to Counselor Congo, the next finance meeting is December 6th.
And if we wanted to move to pass the full budget deliberations,
There's a meeting in January. I just don't recall, but I would
Okay.
just like if we could put it to the January meeting.
the January meeting, that's not in advance of closing off budget conversations.
Or
Okay.
we can move it to February once all the budget discussions are done.
Yeah.
After the 6th.
I guess I would kind of propose if we were going to defer it to a future finance meeting, it would be in February when we're actually closing out service provider conversations. And I believe, as Mr. Miller has said in the past, we do have opportunities through January. If there's anything we still decide on, I mean, we can still return to conversation. So I think when we know what our end state is, I think then we can be in a place to kind of say, now, how do we deal with this and what do we have on the table that we can put forward? So, so I guess I would table a motion to defer this item to the February Finance and Responsible Governance Committee meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. There's a deferral motion on the table. Does anybody have any questions or concerns? No? Okay, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that passes. And the next item is 6.1. It's the 2024 Business Plan and Budget, City Operations and Infrastructure Investment Funding. Can I have a member of the committee put the motion on the floor, please?
I'll put the motion on the floor, the item on the floor.
Councillor Kungle, you're it
There we go.
again.
It's a
Thank
hot,
you.
hot table over here.
As this motion is on the floor, are there any questions from members of committee? Mayor Nuttall.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to confirm for members of council, members of committee, like as we're going through the debate, I think that we're all able to ask questions, right? So, but that's part of the debate, to do questions and then to do the debate and then ask more questions. I think, you know, the chair made a good call on the route here. I don't think it's about suppressing anyone's ability to speak whatsoever, because we're able to now. I guess I have two questions, then a bunch of amendments, if it's okay, Mr. Chair. The first is with regards to the reinvestment reserve to Mr. Miller. You know, when we originally brought the utilities together, my understanding was the policy was around, and the CAO was the finance chair at the time, was around putting dollars away for either special projects or for capital projects that were needed. And it doesn't appear that that's the case 2023, 2024, 5 or 6 or in the foreseeable future. When did that policy change take place?
So through you, Chairman Harvey, to Mayor Nuttall, I'll take a stab at that. And I know there's some history on the other side that might be able to answer it. I know in terms of when did it change, when did it take place? Before we used to never get any dividends from the city. There was from Electra, there was a decision, I think it was when it was PowerStream, to reinvest those dividends. So the money was all reinvested and good investments were made on solar panel work. We started getting a dividend, I believe, in 2019. So there was a long range financial plan done around that time. And the outcome of that was to take 20% of the dividend and put it into tax capital reserve. And then the other amount was put into what's now called the reinvestment reserve. I think council of the day called it community benefit reserve. And at that time, there wasn't, I would say, a formal policy or decision made on how those funds would be used by council. I think over that time where we are today, there were multiple decisions made past in time. So for example, there was a council decision a few years back to help try and offset some of the growth pressures. So you have, before you before they come, you have to build it. So there was a decision to pull some of that dividend into our operating base budget to offset some of those costs. And over time, that's come up to $4.9 million. And there have been some asks that council has used, and then as well as the theater put away $2.5 million into a theater reserve. So I would say from 2018 is really when we've actually had any revenues coming in, and the policy was again around 2018. I don't remember specifically before that time what the decisions were from council. I know we never had the dividend to spend it on, but there might have been some previous council from the past. And, I don't know if anyone else remembers.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Mayor Nuttall, if I could just jump in on that. I would say the stated intent of the reserve when it was created was exactly as you've articulated, which was to create benefit for the community. There wasn't a specific policy attached to that. It was a stated intent, I think is how I would describe it. And as Mr. Miller had highlighted, over the years, subsequent council decisions have sort of diluted that original principle for very good reasons. And there are still some community benefit pieces being funded by it. But as you can see, from the information, there is more of a hodgepodge of things being funded out of that reserve, from the potential new theater at some point to some operating costs, et cetera. So I would say it was a stated intent and not a policy. Mayor Nuttall.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think that I want to highlight this for council because, and quite frankly, Mr. Miller highlighted it for council. Because that's where, and I just want to give an example, that's where the $825,000 that we have invested in social services came from. It's where next year's $825,000 in investment in social services are coming from, which I think fit with the community benefit idea. But when we're taking $5 million out of it a year just to pay the bills, that's a long-term problem in my eyes. Not because I don't think it's going to be there in the future, but because the origin of it is to actually allow for things like the theater, like the Navy cadets, like Allendale Station, like, you can go on because there's a lot of good people who want to do a lot of good things in our community. And unfortunately, we've now inherited a situation where the operating budget relies on the money that was supposed to be going into the community benefits. And so I don't think this is a this year thing, but I think this is over the next number of years, and it's going to take successive councils, quite frankly, to wean ourselves off of the reserve. But I think that there should be a goal set here that we do actually over time wean ourselves off of the use of that reserve for the operating budget. I'm going to leave my second question, I guess, for through the email, and I'm going to go right into amendments if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
By all means, go ahead.
Thank you. So in Appendix E, I would like to move the whole slew, and I just want to confirm there was a recommendation from staff on the budget. The budget was prepared. With that recommendation, there was, if you're not going to accept our recommendation, here are some areas, right? So E isn't recommended by staff, but it's identified as what I'll refer to as the least difficult measures for them to reach a 0%. Okay. And so I'm going to move Appendix E without the $44,000 for communication with the public. Which will still leave us in a position of being a tax increase of, I don't know, 0.014%. Am I anywhere near on that?
Yeah, I think if it's just the 44,000 you're taking it, we'll call it zero.
Oh, no. You don't round yet. We can round at the end. And then when we say it's better than it is. And so I'm going to move that, put it on the floor, and then if there's questions or anything, I'm certainly willing to answer. I know staff are as well.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. So Appendix E is on the floor as an amendment. Are there any members of committee with any questions? Councillor Kungle.
Comments, questions? I'm going to frame it into a question. I'm aligned. I'm not concerned with it, but I think there's some context setting because I want to make sure our assumptions about 44,000 still being enough money. I think that was because the paper is already being produced and it's an insert. So I think we're talking more in the scope of maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars to do something at the equivalent measure. So I just want to make sure, like for us and the public, that the $44,000, even if we save it from this, doesn't mean it's going to be functional for us to replace what we had. So I'm just putting that context there, and I will support the motion.
And go ahead, Mayor Nuttall.
100%. No question. Don't know what that looks like. Don't know what the numbers are, but it goes back to the community benefit that we just talked about. Like, you know, I don't love the idea of providing corporate welfare to media. Like everyone probably knows it's not something I love, right? At the same time, we have to manage the idea of what is happening in this city. We have to be able to communicate it, not just at the doors, not just put a video online and hope somebody watches it. Like, we have to actually do our best to get the message out there. I don't know what it looks like. I can tell you, I probably don't want to be supplementing to the point where we're going door to door, but there's got to be some sort of thing that we can figure out, even if it's a one-page newsletter, that helps us get closer to an informed public, and it's not $44,000. You're 100% right. I think we did a newsletter around the city. Eric's here. I think, Eric, we spent $26,000 sending out one newsletter. Is that roughly the number? It was like 18 in mailing, and then whatever else above. So this doesn't even get around the city twice. And you can imagine you want to be communicating with the city more than two times in 1 year, right? So 100%, I think we're gonna have to come back to it afterwards.
Agreed. No, I don't have any further comments. I support the motion.
Great. Actually, while we're on that, just a question to Miss James Reed. Has any opportunities ever been explored? Because the mayor just spoke about like even a one-page newsletter type of thing. And obviously now, because we don't have a door-to-door newspaper, there's all the flyers and stuff are coming through the mailboxes. Now, obviously, it would be probably far cheaper to partner with one of those local companies that are putting out their flyers to either have a space on that flyer or to have an insert going in that flyer. Has something like that been explored, or is it too early to be asking something like that?
Thank you for the question. I was actually trying to get your attention, so it's perfect. In anticipation of this item earlier coming to Finance Committee, we did do some very preliminary numbers, and we do think that there's a couple options that we could explore pending the further conversation when it happens. But the one option, and we can circulate this through the budget questions as well, but one option, if we did a printed piece monthly by Canada Post to all households, we're estimating around $225,000. It may be a little bit less depending on when we go out for print, RFP and that kind of thing. If you do an ad mail, you don't always get to all households, but if you do it as a government ad mail, you will. So we think that may be a little extra cost, but be worthwhile. And the second option we considered was to print every month a stack of the newsletter, have them at every city facility, Serviceberry, transit terminal, senior centers, and then offer a service where anybody who requested to have them mailed could contact Serviceberry and it would be mailed out. And again, we just did some estimates of the numbers that we would print, but we think that would be approximately $95,000. So I think there are a couple options, but to the mayor's point, it's definitely not $44,000 to get to every household every month.
Great, thank you. And I can't remember the dollar figure off the top of my head, but I'm sure This Week in Barrie in the newspaper wasn't no $44,000 either. It was probably much higher than that.
Thank you. It was $88,000 in this previous calendar year for This Week in Barrie.
Yeah, great, thank you. So even these other methods are a little bit more, but not dramatically more when you consider that we're now having to independently send stuff out to every household. So yeah, thank you for that. Is there any other questions from members of committee first? No? Oh, Councillor Congo.
I'm sorry, this is an interesting topic. I guess one, and I'll leave it as a question, but one thing came to mind, and maybe it's between yourself, Miss James Reed, and then Miss Banfield, because one of the biggest pieces I probably get questions about still around our mailouts that we still pay for, that ties to kind of the legislative practice from planning and development when there's public meetings, is a mail out within, I believe, 150 meters or up to 300 meters. I think it's different from different towers versus an actual development. One, I didn't know, because I'm still hearing people are interested in developments as they're happening broader than the mail outs. And if there's an appropriate place to be considered when you're scoping information coming back, is if there are some things we just can't do, but should we go broader on some of those pieces that are really important? And I'm hearing important in a broader scope than those that are just within the current radius of a development. And so I'll leave it as a comment and see if it fits and what that cost would be. And if there's any merit to saying, we can't do this, there's been changes in the media, but we know it's really important for the public to be notified. And if we can't add to that, which we were doing through digital and getting to everybody, would we ever consider going broader in the mailouts that already go? If that makes sense.
Ms. James Reed.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Congo. I think that's a great point, but I think we would have to work closely with Michelle's team to make sure that only certain ones are featured. If we did every one, it would be like too cost prohibitive. So right now we do drive a lot of traffic to the proposed developments, and I think that's a really popular page, but maybe we could feature each month kind of ones that are coming, or kind of big profile ones that are affecting kind of a broader citywide.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And actually, another thing that I've done myself, Councillor Congo, is done a separate newsletter myself to kind of capture that greater area, because I know obviously they're fulfilling their requirements under the Planning Act. And it's kind of difficult to pick and choose from which applications you go broader on or not, whereas obviously us as council have that ability and don't have to worry about those extra costs involved, because we do have small budgets that will cover some of it, but it runs out pretty quick. Does anybody else have any questions in regards to this? Councillor Rietma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is certainly something that affects Ward 1, because I'm always amazed that I've got quite a few seniors that don't have computers and don't have cell phones, and that's a challenge that we're presented with here. So I'm just thinking of ideas, and I'm wondering if, we send out water bills, can we put something in with the water bill every month? Would that be something that would work? Or these folks definitely listen to the radio and watch the news on TV. Is there something there that we could make work? And I'll just leave those as suggestions for Ms. James Reed and her crew, and she can come back at some point and talk to us about that.
Ms. James Reed.
Thank you for the question. We did explore those options. So first of all, our radio ads, we do have an existing contract and we do run radio ads every week. However, you can't communicate everything on a radio ad, right? We're kind of limited in that. So it's usually more the high profile, the ones that are affecting all residents. And then in terms of the water bills, we have used that in the past on certain campaigns, and we will continue to do that. The issue is that it takes several weeks for it to get to every household. I think they're on a billing cycle. So it would be only certain issues like, a resident waterfront pass expiring, we can communicate it that way. But if it was something that's time sensitive, you would get half the city getting a message now, and then they wouldn't get the same message. A different message would go out the next month to other people. So it's not the perfect solution for us to replace This Week in Barrie.
Great, thank you for that. Anyone else with any questions in regards to the amendment? Pardon me?
The committee is done asking questions.
Actually, I think we're already there if you have a question, Councillor Corsair.
May I ask a question? Through you, Chair, to, I guess, the team that put this together. I'm for the proposed changes in departments, I'm just being my second whole budget, trying to cram all this in my head, there's no real details on what, like, human resources, reduce consulting for human resources. Is this something that's already tied specifically for Appendix E? Is this something that's already tied specifically to our budget binder that we can search out? Because this list isn't very detailed on what we're planning on reducing, cutting out.
CAO Pros.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Corser. I'll give you a high level answer to the high level question. Councillor Corser, this is, it certainly is a summary, but each department, well, not each department, but many departments carry consulting dollars. As an example, you spoke about HR, where they may need to procure legal services or HR legal services. What this is a reflection of a belief by the team, which was my challenge to them, that for a couple of years, they felt they could do with less. If council's goal is overall affordability, which is the message that I think we heard last budget, and certainly in speaking with the mayor as part of this transition to the strong mayor, it was part of the path that was asked for this time. This was a reduction in a service procured by HR. They felt that they could reduce their budget in that area at this time. So there is some additional detail on it, but it wouldn't be line by line.
Okay, just because if I was going to vote or in the future on this, or if I had any impact on this, I would want to know more, maybe more, a little more detail of what I was actually cutting. So that would be my concern, a little more detail, or just Cole's notes, if you will, version, or like a sticky note on what exactly is this is tied to, would make me feel a little more comfortable. But that's all. I've just a comment, I guess. Thank you.
Yeah, just one, but yeah, kind of to your point though, like when you go through the binder, even when you look at the intake forms, they're not as granular as what you're asking for there. And it's, again, just going off the recommendations that are being provided by staff. But even when you look at the services line and then go to that intake form, it's the same thing. It doesn't give you that granular information that you're speaking of now.
I guess, yeah, just to that, I guess I'm a little bit of a micromanager on this because I'm used to dealing with fine detail budget. So it's a little uncomfortable for me getting used to looking at the higher without actually having the details that my brain craves to actually make these kind of decisions. But thank you.
Great, thank you. And since I have them staring at me on the monitor, I'll go to you, Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Chair Harvey, and thank you for the putting up with the picture. I'm extremely sick right now, so I don't, and I'm glad I didn't go to that Santa Claus parade with all of you, or all of you would be facing the same sickness I am right now.
Actually, Councillor Morales, you're going to have to either try and speak a little slower and clearer because we are having an extreme difficulty in hearing you.
Okay, my apologies. Please, yeah, I will speak slower on that. So similar questions to Councillor Corser. I agree with her sentiments on the desire for detail. Two specific ones. Corporate facilities, this is under community and corporate services. Corporate facilities would internally take over snow clearing and grass cutting at all corporate facilities, $111,000, and implement an administrative penalty system to reduce expenses associated with court operations, $500,000. So it's a question for you, Chair Harvey, to staff. Could I get a bit of detail on those two specifically?
I'm not quite sure if Ms. McAlpine heard that one clear, but I see she's got her mic on because I know I did have difficulty in understanding what was being asked. So hopefully you're going to do much better at it than I am.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Morales, the insourcing of snow clearing is something, and grass cutting, which I believe was the first part of your question. Currently, those services are contracted out. Staff have done a high-level business case on what it would cost to bring those services in-house utilizing our own resources. That would require some additional staffing for the corporation, but based on the review that we've done, it would result in a net savings to the corporation. So what we would incur, and to be very open with members of council, we are temporarily doing it this winter because of challenges with procurement of winter control services for city facilities downtown. We are doing that as a pilot. We have piloted it in the past, and so we believe the business case is quite strong for this to be more cost effective than contracting this out. And we also believe that we'll end up with a higher level of service. One of the challenges for the private sector are the carrying the insurance associated with particularly snow clearing and slips and falls. So that additional component is a significant additional cost to the corporation that we already have our own insurance that's broader that would address that. So that's where we see the net savings in terms of insourcing that. The second question, if I understood it correctly, was with respect to administrative penalties. Administrative penalties is a process that utilizes screening and hearing officers instead of returning things through the court process. So that that reduces the cost associated with holding courts. With the automated speed enforcement that is close to launching at this point in time, and the camera is in the testing phase right now, there will be enough volume in the courts that this makes financial sense, whereas in the past, we haven't had enough volume of charges to move to an administrative penalty system. Currently, through the courts, we're required to pay the cost of the justices of the peace who sit through the court process, and we can defer those costs and reduce them utilizing an administrative penalty system. We would require bringing on some resources related to screening and hearing officers, but based on the business case that we've put forward for that and the volume, we believe there's a savings, a significant savings now that we have the right volume that would make that a worthwhile venture. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. McAlpine, thank you for that. That'll be it, Chair Harvey. I just want to say I do agree with Councillor Courser on this. If me as a member of council is expected to, whether it's now verbally or a general committee with a vote, whether I'm expected to support a $3-point-something million cut or not support it, I think a little bit more than just the line needs to be provided. Which actually would probably save time for staff having to explain it to 10 members of council individually, either through emails or even right now when obviously you guys we all have a long night and there's meetings. So I just want to concur with Councillor Courser's sentiment, but these two are phenomenal and I think they'll get us closer to where we need to be.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Councillor Morales. Yeah, I know, especially the administrative penalties. I know other municipalities that have implemented this a few years ago, and it's become very successful, and it really does streamline the process. And obviously, by the dollar amount I'm seeing, is going to save a significant amount of money. Is there any other members with questions? Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. And through you, Chair Harvey, just sticking to Appendix E under Community and Corporate Services, I understand the split hiring of Station 6 firefighters. Given this is in Ward 10, I think I'd be remiss just not asking the question. I know there's been a delay with the development of Station 6 for a number of reasons, which I think we can understand, giving just costs in the market conditions right now. By splitting the hiring of these firefighters over 2024 and 2025, do we have a timeline of when we think the station will be developed? And is there any lead time that we're going to need from a staffing perspective? Like, I would hate to get in a situation where we've got the thing built and we don't have staffing. I know residents are keen to get this in place, just given the growth and wanting to make sure that our emergency services keep up with the growth. And even if a station's not built, is there a need for additional boots on the ground, so to speak, in anticipation of increased call volumes as a result of increased population? So just a few questions there. I agree with this approach. I just want to make sure we're not going to come back and beat ourselves up over it.
Ms. McAlpine.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Hamilton, we spent a fair amount of time, the fire chief, reviewing our call volumes and the timing of Station 6. This is why we're not recommending deferring the entire hiring. We do have some current vacancies from retirements in the service, and we would be looking to fill those retirements as well as hire 8 approximately of the 20 that were pre-approved by council last year in 2024. That would address some of the pressures related to overtime. 8 is sort of the magic number where it makes sense. That brings you a class of 12 for training of new employees. And then the remaining number would be hired. The remaining 12 would be hired in 2025. It is about, it is a multi-month process for hiring new staff as firefighters. And so this is intended to align the timing with the actual opening of the station. And you are correct, the station has been delayed. We were delayed in acquiring the land from the landowner. And but we are at a significant stage in terms of the design while we've been waiting to acquire the land. And Mr. Hughes could always provide more details on the status of Station 6 and its design, should you wish.
Anything further, Councillor Hamilton? Great, thank you. Anyone else with any questions? Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. Yeah, far be it for me to get in the way of staff's recommendation to reduce the budget. So thank you, staff. But I do want to follow up on a couple of the comments. I think they were really well, just that level of detail. I think having us be able to better understand how you got to those would really be helpful. And then, certainly, as we look at the other items and that are in the 2 very large binders. But my one question just kind of jumped out. I asked a question around the reduced legal services and consulting by $100,000. Just curious, maybe a comment, because again, we don't have the detail of how the legal department came to that number, and maybe I'm wrong in our growing litigious society, whether that's obviously you've presented it, so just curious what that how you got to that number and how you're comfortable with that reduction. Chair, through you too, I'm not sure if it's the legal department or.
Mr. Mills, did you want to take a stab at that one?
I'll give it a shot, yeah. Through you, Chair Harvey to Councillor Harris. I believe we looked at the current litigation that was underway and what we envisioned the next steps in that litigation to be through the 2024 year, and estimated that we could reduce our budget by $100,000 and still have sufficient funding to fund that litigation.
Okay, thank you. And I touch wood. Should we have a year where we have more legal concerns than we otherwise would like? Where would those funds come from? Just so people understand that we wouldn't be without representation.
There is a small reserve fund that was created, I believe it was 4 or 5 years ago. And there are additional funds available in that reserve to fund a shortfall.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Is anyone else with any questions in regards to the amendment? I'd just like to thank staff. I think this really shows how I think both sides are working together as a team to get us to where we need to be. Especially when, like, I was actually quite surprised how quick this chart came forward to show us where some of the savings could come from, and obviously I entrust that the staff are selecting the ones that obviously you guys know far more about the granular piece of the day-to-day operations as to where those savings can come. So I would be the last person to start second guessing those decisions. With that being said, for those members of committee, I'll take the vote on the amendment. All those in favor? And that passes. Does anybody else have any other amendments? Go ahead, Mayor Nuttall.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's also, I was remiss at the beginning of this. I never said thank you to Mr. Miller, to your entire team in the finance department, but also right across the corporation, for all the heavy lifting that takes place. You start in May, I think, and run all the way through till, well, I guess the end of January, on this. So, that's 8 out of 12 or something like that, if I count correctly. So thank you. to all of the staff who've been, doing inputs, and it doesn't go unnoticed that there is additional pressure applied when the expectation is to try to get down to as low as possible, 1.06, and then even lower down to close to zero. Like, it doesn't go unrecognized, and I know that's difficult. I know that sometimes it may even feel that the gratitude for the work doesn't align with the budgeting of it. But the gratitude is there, and I'm thankful for all the work that you put in as an entire team. So I've got a few others. I'm going to move two of them together, if that's okay, to the committee, because they're the same thing, just different years. Okay. We made a decision a few weeks ago that would include MAT contributions to Sadlon Arena. And that is not reflected either in the 23 year or the 24 year. And so I wanted to put those MAT contributions into the budget so they're recognized. I'm going to ask Mr. Miller before I put the amendment on the floor, because I had envisioned putting them into the tax stabilization reserve, which in the long term to me is where if we're going to have any dollars going into reserves in the short term, where it should go. But Mr. Miller, we exchanged emails, but I decided to get a workout in before instead of answering the last one. So
yeah, just through you, Chairman Harvey. Our policy, the financial policy framework I referred to, actually has a line in there where if we have a year-end surplus, we do usually make recommendations to kind of allocate some of those funds to various reserves, but one of them is the tax capital reserve. It's been depleted the last few years, and in the binder you did note, you did read that it was in a deficit position. So you can do this motion to top it up as you presented. I was suggesting to you that we could deal also with that when we finalize the 2023 year end numbers. We could utilize some of the surplus to top up the reserve at that time. If you do it now, then there'll be opportunities to do other things with the other surplus if there is one.
So you're recommending the tax capital?
I would say for this, we need tax capital. Yeah, if you put in tax capital, that reserve needs help. That would be my recommendation, and we can deal with the stabilization reserve in the year-end report.
Okay, I'll take that feedback on that. So it was $150,000 from the municipal accommodation tax reserve to the tax capital reserve for 2023 and 2024. And what that does is, exactly as it said, it takes money out of one of our reserves and puts it directly into the tax capital reserve rather than it being in the municipal accommodation tax reserve, which runs on on a surplus, B is growing, and C, we made this decision a few weeks ago.
Great, thank you. Just to confirm the dollar amount, because maybe I misheard you. What was the dollar amount you said again?
It's $150,000 for each year.
I did mishear you then.
Yeah.
I was looking at the amendments on the screen, and that's why I just wanted to double check. Thank you. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thanks through you, Chair, to the mover of the motion. You said that it comes out of the MAT to the tax. The MAT funds the operation, then goes into the reserve amount. Is that not correct? Like right now, the Sadlon is funded through our operation budget, which the MAT would fund that in 2023 and 2024. So there would be a reduction in the operation budget. And then the money that is saved from the operation budget then into the tax reserve. Is that not?
Mayor Nuttall.
Right, but because it wasn't included in either of these budget documents, we're just bypassing that. So, we've already envisioned that we're balancing the budget in 23-24. So this would just expedite it directly in.
Perfect. Thank you.
I saw Mr. Miller's mic on there. Did you want to add anything to that discussion? No?
Good.
Great, thank you.
Point of
Yeah, go ahead.
no, I
Councillor
guess just
Kungl.
checking for process, because the motion doesn't name the Sadlin, but the conversation does. So I just need to check in because I've had to declare conflicts of interest with matters related. I'm not seeing that in the scope of the that was narrative. It's not tied to the motion. So I am looking to motion on it, but I thought I would just voice that so people know that the narrative being brought forward has nothing to do with the motion. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Mayor. No.
Yep, sorry, Councillor Kungl, I apologize. Yes, it has nothing to do with the issue of the conflict previously stated, as far out as I can tell.
Yeah, no, the amendment placed on the floor doesn't specifically mention any facility, so.
Thank you. No, just for disclosure, because it was just general reference. So I wanted to make sure if we're talking about the tenant or the building, so the public knows. That's okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Is there any other members of committee or non-committee with any questions? Okay, with that, I will call the vote. All those in favor? And that passes. And Mayor Nuttall, you still have the floor.
Yeah, I'm basically done. I'm gonna move three, I guess there's three more, and then I'm gonna submit a question with regards to the firefighters into the budget email at the end, either tonight or tomorrow morning. So I'm gonna leave that one. So I'm gonna move that we remove from the operating 2864 is the number. It is the new investment service recommendation form for carbon management software, resulting in a reduction of $20,000. 2852. Sorry, I'm jumping between pieces of paper. And that's the transportation engineer position identified in new investment service recommendation form, but still remain a temporary position. So it's not deleting it. It's just remaining as a temp. And Madam Clerk, you did a great job of getting this all in really quickly. 2828, which is the new investment and service recommendations for parks forestry staff. And that would be reduced by 200,000. So it's 320 that's being requested. We would leave $120,000 in there, but reduce the overall on that request by $200,000. So the net, if adopted, the net increase would be, or decrease would be $200,000 on that one.
Great, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Is there any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Kungl.
If I may, and because I looked it up, if it helps for process. So for those of the binders, if you need to make reference, 2864 is on page 203. 2852 is on page 189. 2828 is on page 191. Just to help those follow along if you're going to source the actual intake forms. But I did have a request of the mover of the motion, if you could separate them out. Yeah.
I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the first one we will deal with then is Form 2864, which is the carbon management software. Is there any questions in regards to that? Go ahead, Councillor Kungl.
I appreciate always trying to kind of get us to the point of being as lean as possible. I can't support that for a couple of pieces. I have been pretty impressed overall with the intake forms, but in particular this one, not to say $20,000 is nominal, but compared to other things, I think when I look at the intake form, there are a couple of points where I see it as being value for money. So this one talked about, $20,000, but it's one that was identified by staff as a return on investment. So paying for itself in 5 years. And in addition to that, being revenue generating. We've asked staff to be innovative. Our strategic plan ties to climate change. It's aligned to that, and it's also aligned to our council direction. So I actually would like to pause on this if possible, but for the $20,000 to take it out, I think it's going to, it's almost a, I would encourage that this is one that we consider to keep in because it's about adding on software to our current pieces that allow us to actually participate in streamlining some of the regulation reporting. So I don't have a question for staff because I'm fine with that, but it's not one I can support taking the $20,000 from.
Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thanks through you, Chair. maybe to Councillor Congo. The actual reason why this started off from the amendment last budget that was going to have the carbon capture, and we were going to monetize the capturing of carbon. This is actually a program that the federal government is trying to push right now. It's actually functioning in British Columbia, but the program isn't actually up and running and doesn't do what it says. So at this time, in its infancy stages, it would actually accomplish nothing. And staff are now working with they're going through the process of our carbon capture, and they're in talks. So hopefully seeing that this would become redundant, and it wouldn't facilitate what it says it does.
Go ahead, Councillor Congo.
If I still have the floor, then I wouldn't mind redirecting this to staff to clarify, because I know Adam and the team have been doing a lot of work. So if it's still coming through intake, knowing that process starts early in the spring, and it's not something that was kind of pulled out through Appendix E, is kind of promoting the reduction of it. I would much rather keep it in if it's felt to be not necessary. Trust that staff would then pause on the implementation. But I guess I'm looking for clarity from staff to say this is still, to me, a legitimate piece that's got merit. So if I may, I guess, redirect that to Mr. Arrhenius Sundarin, if that fits, or to Mr. Hughes, whomever is best to direct that to. Thank you, Rick.
I'll leave it to you, CAO Proust, to decide which staff member is best to answer that question, since we've been back and forth with a couple.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. I think Mr. Hughes is best positioned to answer the question.
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair Harvey to Councillor Kungle. So this is initially a project that we had submitted as requested by council to support the council initiative. I believe it does have merit, but to your point, if we move forward with the work that we're doing now, I mean, we don't need to pull the trigger on this in January. So if it is approved, we can slow walk it as it were, and not do it. Alternatively, it could be canceled. We could request it again if we need it. One's probably more work than the other.
Which one might be more work than the other, I guess, is to implement and then cancel it if it's not needed. I'm assuming,
Well, I
we're
would
putting out
suggest
expenses.
approving it, but not implementing it until we know that we need it. And if we don't need it, then we'll just let you know that we don't need it. Return us your capital status.
I prefer that consideration, actually. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mayor Nuttall.
Yeah.
And I'll
so-
get to you shortly there, Councillor Morales. I do see your hand.
So I'm going to dive right in on this one. We made a budget amendment. We gave direction. We then received a memo on June the 21st, which was a very busy evening for us, stating that that wasn't being proceeded with. September, I asked for an update on where we were at on our direction. Then it was flagged to me, hey, you missed this on that night, which is on me, right? That's on all of us. The way forward to me, we gave direction that said, don't spend any money and find out what you can come back with in terms of new revenue. And now we have a budget request to spend money with no actual ability to show where the revenue is coming back, because it doesn't actually function yet. I got a problem with that. Like we're going from no spend to spend and discover what the revenue is to, well, the feds say they're going to get it working eventually, so there's going to be revenue. And I love the federal government, especially if they're giving us money, but I don't have the faith yet to be able to say yes to that. So for me, that's why. So there's a lot packed in that $20,000 for me, and I fully admit that. But it doesn't make a lot of sense when you're looking at our last budget direction versus what we're seeing here, because it's completely counter.
In follow up to that, then, because I'm assuming if it's not passed, then we're losing the out year. So we either then look to staff to say bring it back next budget if there continues to be merit and things change in the system, or I'm assuming we could say it's not relevant to this year. It sounds like, so defer this to next budget for consideration, so we're not losing the out years. Yeah. Okay. So then if it would be a friendly, is to defer this intake form to 2025. Looking for staff to bring it forward if there's something changing in the system, knowing that this is still something that makes sense from a return on investment.
And you'll take that as a friendly? Great, thank you. Is there any further questions in regards? Oh, actually, Councillor Morales, I forgot about you there, sorry.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. My only question was just going to be if I could have the mayor explain it, which he did after Councillor Congo spoke. So I'm all good.
Great, thank you. Anyone else with any questions? With that, I will call the vote. All those in favor of the amendment, and that passes. And Mayor Nuttall, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I was just gonna ask, so the other, is the other two okay to package together?
Sure, I think you could probably know where I'm going to say, but yeah, go for it.
Wait, no, I mean the, so 285. Let me look, sorry. 2852 and 2828. Are they okay? Like, do we need to deal with them separately or together?
I'd love to deal with them separately.
Separately? Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead. Yeah. But then I guess we'll start with 2852, sir.
Yeah, so the next one will be the transportation engineer form 2852 to keep it as a temporary position. Any questions or comments in regards to that? Go ahead, Councillor Congo.
Thank you. I guess I'll still, I'm glad it's not being taken out, and I know the balance of that, but I'm assuming, can you share more about why at least keeping it as temporary? Because I know some of these, we've already got workflow, and it's kind of recognizing there's work we're paying for, and let's just secure the staff who are doing the work in it. So for me, it makes sense from a focus of paying the benefits and securing a position from a retention of workflow. So there's less disruption if, people in temporary positions might be more apt to leave roles or look for security, especially in an unsecure economic climate. So happy to have a conversation about that.
Yeah, I guess, your point taken on in terms of the length of time of an individual willing to commit to something based on a temporary, position, et cetera. Point taken on that. I guess my flip would be that for me, when I look at it, so what it says to me is we can pay for this position inside of the current budget, or we can increase the budget costs and hire a new position and then not realize savings on the other side. So there is no corresponding saving to the addition. Therefore, the reduction, they're going to in-house find the money for that, either through, that department's excess of salary dollars or some other way, or maybe it's salary gapping. So for me, that's where I was comfortable, and it may not be where you're comfortable, and I'm okay with that. Yeah.
And sorry, just to clarify, we're on the
2852 transportation.
Transportation. Yeah. And so that's fine. I wanted to have a bit more of a consideration because we've got people in those roles and we know it's the work, but tied to that transportation piece too. I chair active transportation. So of course, that's a particular piece where we want to make sure there's some sustainability of that focus, especially with the work being done in development and supporting, making sure when we've recently talked about, road widths and widening and active transportation supports and making sure there's dedicated pieces. So for me, it's just, making commitment to what we value and saying we're in, and that is a role that's going to be continuing in workforce that we're paying for now. So I'd like to see it permanent.
Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. To staff, if this motion passes, meaning the position stays temporary, can council expect a reduction of service, either in quantity or quality, to the initiatives that this position does?
Go ahead.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Morales. The one thing that I'd like to note is that the cost of the temporary position would not be in the budget. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So we'd have to find it from elsewhere. In terms of the level of service, I don't think there'd be a noticeable change. However, as Councillor Congo pointed out, This is a position that we would require on a long-term basis, and obviously a permanent staff would be better from a continuity and also retention point of view.
Just to follow up, so to clarify the first thing that you said, so and please let me know if I interpreted this correctly. If we voted down this amendment, the budget increase amounts would go up because that money would have to be found somewhere else. Is that a correct interpretation?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Morales, I think that is a correct interpretation. I think there would be a difference in budget required for a temporary versus a permanent. And we would estimate that to be around $9,000.
So
Go ahead, Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. So the numerical impact to the overall budget, Bala, would be about 8,000 to 9,000, depending on whether we go permanent or temporary.
That's correct.
Okay. I'm not on the committee, but I'm a little bit split on this one, and this is why. This position is extremely important, as Councillor Congo says, to all the work that we've done over the last couple of months in terms of road widths, specifically separated cycle tracks. So all those points that we've made about having a safe space, a safe travel space for cyclists and pedestrians to be implemented. A lot of that work is now, we need boots on the ground to make sure that all the subdivisions in Ward 9 and 10 specifically, but in Ward 7 as well, that we have staff to be able to support the work we did. I saw a hand up. I saw Mr. Miller's hand up, Chair Harvey. So I'll maybe stop here and see if Mr. Miller has something to add.
Mr. Miller, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Harvey. So just to be clear for everyone, so currently this is a temporary position that ends December 31st this year. So if we remove this intake form, there's no funding for the position in January. So we would need funding to be put in the budget to fund the temporary position. So the temporary position would be, as Bala was saying, 10,000 less type of thing, 10 to 15,000 less. But right now this position ends if we don't provide additional funding.
Okay, perfect. And I'll just close off, Chair Harvey. My personal opinion, we can't keep messing up the new subdivisions, to be blunt. And by messing up, I mean not doing it the right road widths, not doing the right cycle tracks, and not doing the right infrastructure. So future councillors have to deal with very irate residents in regards to speeding or the safety of the family. So this is a vital position. However, from what I'm hearing, the position still remains at least for one more year. So I don't think it would be the end of the world as long as we don't run into a challenge where the person stays one more year but leaves, let's say in April, because they got a permanent position. So I'm a little bit stuck on this one, and Chair Harvey, if maybe it's appropriate, I guess to ask Mayor Nuttall what he kind of thinks based on the answers that we've heard from staff, and then some of the feedback and concerns.
Yeah, thank
Mayor
you.
Nuttall, go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor. With regards to the position, the amendment that was actually put forward didn't discontinue the temporary. It actually maintained the temporary. So that it's not something that's going to fall off completely. And you're right, it would require funding. What I want to know is at which point and in what budget this council or previous council approved the temporary. Like, show me the temporary that was approved, they increased the budget. Like a line item somewhere in a budget.
So through you, Chair Harvey, to Mayor Nuttall, certainly an interesting ongoing conversation. So temporary employees don't come to council until such time as staff believe that they may need to be recommended as permanent, which is the situation you have here tonight. And if you look at the intake form 2852, you can see over the years, the workload in that area has gone up exponentially. So it's not surprising at some point, the decision was made, we needed to bring in some temporary resources or the work doesn't get done. You never know what the path of that is. So temporary employees are sought, they're brought in on a contract. We are restricted by council direction on adding FTEs. Only council can do that. That'd be full-time employees. We are also restricted in our collective agreements with our union. We have a plan and a strategy where we come to council. Oftentimes we say we don't need this anymore. The project's ended, the contract's over, the employee goes away. Sometimes we say, well, we've got 3 years of run rate and it looks like we're getting busier and busier. So council, we think that you need to consider making this a full-time employee. In this situation, this employee will go away at the end of December, which is, if that's council's direction, you will save the $160,000 on paper. The reality is there will be work that won't get done.
But Mr. CAO, that's not what's on the floor. What's on the floor is that it remain a temporary position. And my point is here that this isn't a temporary position that was approved previously as a specific position that was needed. It was one that was identified with inside the corporation that was needed because of the workload that had increased. So the net change that's being requested by staff is for $160,000 that's never been accounted for around this table in the past, right? It's been in the budget at large. And
Correct.
So to them be told, okay, the FTE to the temporary is only a $10,000 difference. It's a little hard to take because it doesn't show the full accounting of the temporary staff. And maybe there's 150 temporary staff that this is the case with, or maybe there's 2. We don't know that, but all of a sudden there's a $160,000 increase where there's no offset on the other side. So that's what we see in the budget process. We see a $160,000 increase on what we're being told there's no either qualitative or quantitative increase in work.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Mayor Nuttall. Mayor Nuttall, I would argue that there is a quantitative increase in work. It has been articulated over the years. Under total budget management, staff have filled the position temporarily, and we're recommending to council, we think that this trend is not going to end. We think it's going to continue. And at this point, our authority ends, and we turn to council and say, listen, it's your decision. Continue the position, turn it into an FTE, or don't. But that's a council decision. We can't, for 10 years, keep temporary employees. That's not our authority level. So we have a process where we come back to council. At any given time throughout the year, we may hire potentially hundreds of temporary employees through projects, needs, leaves, absences. The work carries on, but we only have the full-time employees approved by council. Despite the fact you may have budget dollars because somebody is off work or something like that, you actually don't have the authority to hire their replacement. So that is the sort of administration piece that we have to address through this. So as Bala had highlighted, we believe the work will continue. We believe that there is a need. If your amendment is to keep it temporary, I'm sure we can make that work. But we do have a responsibility to call it out to council. So we can certainly work on a better process for that, but that's why it's in front of you tonight.
Right. And I want to, like, for members of council, when I broke my foot and needed more help, and now I still need that help. One day that saga will end. I was able to move within my budget to be able to bring somebody on. I remember I actually came to council and said that, right? And so those are some of the moves that our team makes on our behalf in every department across the corporation. My point is that there's now a $160,000 increase on this piece with no corresponding offset for the temp. And it may be in there somewhere actually, but we don't see it, right? And so for me, if I don't see it, then I think it means that we can move forward on it. And it may be that we need 2 more of these folks next year or the year afterwards. I'm saying for this budget, for me, I feel more comfortable leaving where it's at and leaving it for a later day to determine whether we make it full time.
Great, thank you. And I just want to chime in here for a sec, just to get a little bit of clarity from the CAO. Like this particular position that's been temporary now, has it just been temporary for the 2023 year, or has this been going for a longer period?
to you, Chair Harvey. I think it's been around for at least 2 or 3 years.
Okay, yeah, like, I'll be quite honest with you. I do share the same concerns as Mayor Nuttall, because obviously the temporary positions don't come to council. Section 12 under the motion in regards to the budget specifically gives EMT the authorization to hire these temporary workers. And obviously there's money within the budget to be able to bring in, I don't even know how many temporary employees on an annualized basis. And there is no need to come to us, but there's obviously some money available when it's not just one temporary employee, there's several temporary employees across the organization. And do we have a rough idea of roughly how many temporary employees that we had across the organization for 2023? If you don't have a hard number, that's fine. I don't even know if you have like just a rough idea, because
Through you, Councillor Harvey, I believe we're working on that as part of the questions that came in the other day. I don't have it in front of me or on top of my head, but I believe we're looking at that.
great. Okay, I'll leave it at that, but I personally do support this too, because over my 5 years now on council, I've noticed this trend where there's a lot of temporary positions that obviously for organizational needs come then forward as a permanent request. But it just goes to show you that there's some buffer within that budget that's been approved for that fiscal year to be able to cover all these temporary workers. So that's the one concern that I definitely do share with the mayor. Councillor Corser.
Through you, Chair, to, I guess, CAO Prowse, I suppose, or Mr. Miller. Do we know how much this temporary employee is getting paid annually at this point as a temp?
Through you, Mayor Harvey, to Councillor Corser. So I don't have an exact number, but I think that the permanent position was being asked for at 159,000. I think it'd probably be about 10-15,000 less was what we would need to budget for.
Okay, so it would be straight dollars and cents. It would not maybe be hard in the budget Excel spreadsheet, but it would be about a $10,000-ish difference to hire this individual on. Does that include all coverage of benefits, et cetera?
I would, through you, Councillor Corser, through you, Mayor Harvey, Councillor Corser. Yes, I mean, I would phrase the motion to maintain it as a permanent position, reducing, the ask would be 159 minus $15,000 would be enough to cover the temporary position. I don't have the answer in terms of exactly all that would cover, but on average, that's believe that's what it's currently sitting at in the budget.
And also the labor market for transportation engineers, or just engineers as a whole, I understand is very competitive at this point. As the city grows and as we are asking the transportation department to come forward with more innovative ideas, putting more pressure on them for active transportation, coming up with like better projects, I think we're putting a lot of pressure on that department, and considerations of the salary gapping that continues on and the need to have good employees to help support our city as it grows safely. I would think that this would be a position that would be worth investing in. That's just my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. And through you, Chair Harvey, and fabulous conversation to the Finance Committee here. I've actually sent a lot of those questions to Mr. Miller previously, Amy or Councillor Corser, your exact question in terms of how much that temp was previously getting paid. So we'll wait for those answers. It's hard putting you on the spot this evening, but there's actually a number of positions that there's requests for the temporary to permanent. There's, I think, risk inspectors, there was an office assistant, and this one as well. So my question is, knowing that they were hired on a temporary basis and the department found it within their current budget to pay that temporary contract and has the opportunity to retain them on a temporary basis. If this is a priority of the department, they could essentially say, we had this money last year in our budget. I don't know where that money is going to go this year, if they've reallocated to something else. But if this was a priority again, I would say continue to maintain that $140,000, $145,000 you've been paying on a temporary basis, and come to council and ask us for the difference of the 10 to 15 in order to pay this person benefit and pension, and ask for them to be full time. So the net difference for council would actually only be $10,000, $15,000 because you've already found it in your current operating budget that we don't get to see. So I'm no question tonight. I think we can take this offline at this point because there are a number of other positions that we have the exact same question for. And we can give some staff some time to actually determine what the current salaries are for the temporary positions, where the departments are getting the current funding to fund these staff members, and if that funding would continue going forward. So is that a good idea? Because I could list a number of other positions here tonight too, but considering it's 3 minutes to 7.
Did you want to withdraw your amendment then, and then we can discuss
Yeah,
this deeper at general committee?
I think that makes sense on a broader basis to withdraw that. And I think on I don't want to rush the other amendment 2828, so that can move to general committee. And I do want to state and just recognize that we are now having this conversation far in advance of when we would have any other year. We're going to walk into a general committee meeting, I think, with everybody a lot further ahead than we were last year. A, because of election, B, because of we've changed the process. So these are good conversations to be having, and they will smooth out over years, I think. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for being so prepared, and thank you to staff for providing so much information to us, because it's obviously made it a lot easier to get through.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Is there any other members of committee that have any amendments? Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. This isn't an amendment. It's more of a question to through you to Bala. In regards to the waste management, the increase is about 3.6 million from last year to this year. So the request is 10.9 million for 2024. Is that whole cost just in the new contract? Or is that including our staff and stuff? And the actual increase is about 3.5 million for the new contract.
So through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Thompson, sorry, Deputy Mayor Thompson. The increase is primarily due to the waste collections contract, but there are also some other costs related to administering the waste collections contract that kind of compound the increase, but the increase is primarily because of the new waste collections contract.
So maybe if for next budget or general committee, and maybe as a question, as it's become basically a user's rate with the waste management, and we've basically got legislative change to how we collect our garbage and recycling. So the residents are actually getting a reduction of service provided by the municipality with an increase in price. What I'd really like to see, and we don't need an answer tonight, Mr. Miller, but an actual line item on the tax bill of the waste management. So removing it from the actual operating budget to be a standalone item as a waste management, because it's actually just a service provider. So whatever portion is the new waste collection, and then residents can see exactly what the costs are for certain services. Like I would like to see an itemized tax bill from our service providers, so the residents can actually have the information's power, where they can see it all, where everything seems to be pushed down to us, and we're stretching the 9 cents, on a constant basis. And it's getting to the point where the people around here, and staff included, are always looking for ways, where we're reducing things, and we're the one where we should just show that certain decisions out of our control are affecting our taxpayers and I believe that giving it a line item of service providers and changes to legislation that affects our residents, I think would be a better practice. But like I said, I'll leave that to you, and I don't need an answer, but I would like to see something provided where it's removed from our operating budget as a service provider.
Great. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Given the time that we're at and trying to keep us on as close to schedule as we can, because we do have that public meeting at 8 o'clock also, I would ask that we now vote on the amendment as amended. And then that will also then give us some time over the next week to deal with further matters. And then obviously we have all the time in the world when it comes to dealing with this at general committee and having multiple general committee meetings if need be. So with that being said, I will call the vote on the motion as amended. All those in favor? And that passes.
Move to adjourn.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, actually, I'm just going to adjourn. I was going to ask you because obviously the next meeting is your meeting. So how much of a delay would you like?
I think it's our meeting, but can we take 12 minutes? So we'll come back a quarter after.
Sure.
Just
So
a question
we are
before we
now
adjourn. So I have a number of items from the capital side of things for amendments. Should I just hold those now, given that it's 7? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So Finance and Corporate Services Committee will now be adjourned until 7:15.